I just want to thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to welcome everybody. 31st Street has been talking for a while about having a speaker series and just inviting people who can speak to us on various topics and inspire us, inform us. We know that our members sort of look forward to doing things other than attending fundraisers or writing postcards or canvassing, and people want to feel like we are a community. And so we're making an effort to think of things to offer our community in addition to just all the regular activist activities that we do. So this event came about because one of our dedicated members was at an event, a live event, where she saw Simon Rosenberg and she spoke to him and asked him if he would come, and he said yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan Weinman to introduce Simon.
Hey, thank you, Lisa. Can you hear me? Okay. Simon Rosenberg is a highly regarded political strategist and commentator with more than 30 years of experience in national politics and television news. He has built a new home for his political analysis, commentary, and live political discussions at Hopium Chronicles, an engaging new project on the Substack media platform. And for those of you who have not yet signed up to receive the newsletter, we could probably drop a link into the chat for you to be able to do that. If you are a fan of Robert Hubble or Justin Craven, you will love Simon's daily newsletter. He has advised elected officials and campaigns at all levels of government and across the country. His commentary and insights appeared regularly in the country's most important news organizations for decades. Last year, he received a great deal of notoriety for being one of the only commentators who called the 2022 election correctly, as he rightly forecast that a red wave was not coming and that it would be a much better year for Democrats than conventional wisdom held. He has served in senior roles at the DNC, DCCC, worked on 2 presidential campaigns, including a leadership role in the Clinton War Room in 1992. And he was instrumental in founding the House New Democratic Coalition, the Donor Advisory Network, Democracy Alliance, and was a leading candidate for the DSC chair in 2005. He began his career in the television news business, working as a writer and producer for ABC News and Linda Ellerby's Lucky Duck Productions. And in 1996, he started the New Democratic Network, NDN, the political organization and think tank that he ran in March of 2023. It was during this time that it was one of the most influential political organizations in American politics. I'm going to turn it over to Simon. Take it away.
Sure, Susan and Lisa, thank you both so much. And thanks to all of you. I really try to come on as many of these groups as I can, because I'm here really primarily to say thank you for the incredible work that you're doing to save our country from the grips of MAGA, to save our democracy, to make sure all the remarkable opportunities that we've had in our lives are there for our kids and our grandkids.
Donald Trump was indicted on June 8th. We got a sense for the 37 charges against him on June 9th, and on June 13th, he was prosecuted.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm really here to say thank you, because it's really my belief that what's happened in the last three elections that we've had, where we've performed at the upper end of what was really possible for us, has been because of millions of people who just decided that they weren't going to let their country slip away. And these patriots, like all of you, all across the country, who love the United States, have done postcards and texted and made phone calls and canvassed and given money and been on Zooms. And it, just so you know, I mean, I've probably spoken this year to more than 10,000 people on Zooms like this. I do 2 to 3 a week. And I'm doing it because there is a national movement. I mean, people ask me sometimes, why aren't there protests like in Israel? Well, we are having a slow burn protest in America. It's all of you doing the work that you do. And frankly, this is probably more effective than street protests. But let me go through and talk about what I think is happening today, and then let's have a fun conversation. So first of all, I start all my presentations with this basic grounding in what happened in 2022, because getting that right really matters for what's going to happen this year and next. In 2022, there were really two elections. There was a bluer election inside the battleground and a redder election outside the battleground. Inside the battleground, and despite high inflation and low Biden approval, we did something remarkable, right? We not only just held our own, but we picked up governorships and a single Senate seat, and we won state legislative chambers, and we amazingly, increased our margin over 2020 in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. And we got to 59% in Colorado, 57% in Pennsylvania, 55% in Michigan, 54% in New Hampshire. And we just got to 56% in that Wisconsin Supreme Court race. And this was supposed to be a bad year for us, right? And so the performance in the battleground was extraordinary. It was one of the best performances by a political party in power in the last 100 years of our politics. And it's my belief that that happened because of all of you, and that our campaigns had unprecedented amounts of money. In many of the House and Senate races, we outspent the Republicans by 4, 5, 6 to 1. That's never happened before. The DNC invested a huge amount of money in building out field operations in the battlegrounds to allow all the texting and the phone calling and the postcarding to be coordinated and more effective. And because of the early vote, what it means now, because we've now embraced the early vote, we're now starting to hit secondary and tertiary GOTV targets, right? 10 days out, not at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is the way we used to do it. And it's a much better system. And it's why we're driving turnout through the roof. Our early vote performance in 2022 was better than in 2018 and 2020. It's almost impossible to believe that happened, given how much downward pressure there was on us. And we were told repeatedly in the final few months of the election that it was Republicans who were energized and not us, right? That the red wave was coming, which meant that the Democrats are down and the Republicans were up. Well, the exact opposite happened in the battlegrounds. And so remarkable performance. And thanks to all of you who participated in that. In some ways, it was an even more remarkable performance than 2018 and 2020, which were pretty good, by the way. The admonition, though, is that outside the battleground, where we didn't have all that money, where we didn't control the information environment, we didn't push turnout to the upper end of what was possible, the Republicans made gains. And it was a reminder that, they're still much louder than we are. They still are better at controlling the daily discourse than we are. And where we don't build these big campaigns, we don't organize, they can still have an advantage. And so part of what I've been doing in Hopium and my big advice is I've been making the case that, we have to do two big things this year to have the kind of election that we want to have next year. One is that we have to learn how to get loud. We have to be louder. We've got to close the loudness gap, particularly around the economy. Even though the Democrats have been so much better, we've had 3 consecutive Democratic presidents who brought growth and large amount of job creation and lower deficits, and 3 consecutive Republicans who brought recession, higher deficits, and economic decline. Republicans are still trusted more in the economy today than we are. It's extraordinary. And it's something that we just have to change. And I think we have the power to change. We know from polling that if people don't know what Joe Biden's done, and when they're informed of it, his standing goes way up. So we know this from mountains of polling, that if we just put more information into our daily discourse and help people understand what's happened in their own country, we can get dramatic benefit from that. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing now the Biden team lean into this economic debate with everything they got, right? It's all they're doing every day because they see the same polling data. We all see it, right? Which is, we know that we can't have the election we want to have if Republicans are, beating us on the economy. It's the only issue that Republicans are really connecting with voters right now. And if we take that away from them, they've got nothing. And so the strategic opportunity is immense, which is why a lot of the groups that I've been working with are figuring out how to take my charts and graphs and the stuff coming from the White House and spread it through their networks to tell the story that Joe Biden's been a good president and the country's better off. The second thing I've been advising people to do is to try to launch a national youth voter registration drive. It's my hope that this cycle, we don't try to get, Biden got to 51%. I think we need to strive to get to 55 this cycle. And we've done this before. From 1992 to 2004, We averaged 47% of the vote in those 4 elections. And I and a bunch of other people 20 years ago saw this opportunity with millennials and Hispanics, this new part of the electorate, argued that we had to lean into it, push our performance up through as big as we could. Obama then did that in 2008. And in those 4 elections since, we've averaged 51%. So we went from 47 to 51. That didn't happen by accident. There was strategy behind that. And now I've laid out on my Hopium site a strategy for how we get to 55. And the most important part of that is to dramatically increase youth participation in the election next year, and to launch a national youth voter registration drive. Because one of the things that we've learned through research is that young people vote at the same levels as older people if they're registered. They're just registered at a lower number. So that's an easy thing to fix, right? We have plenty of money, lots of volunteers, lots of enthusiasm. And we need, I hope that the national party and the campaign, the Biden campaign, adopt a national strategy to increase youth turnout this year. I don't think this is a next year thing. I'm certainly being loud about that to my friends in the campaign. And what's been great on the Hopium side is that we've started seeing various groups across the country adopt programmatic activity, and we can talk more about that, to help push youth voting through the roof over the next year. It's really important. And then, and it's how I think the most effective way we can get to 55. What's been exciting about this year now, as we move into 2023, that basic dynamic where we were overperforming expectations, Republicans were underperforming, has continued to show up in our elections, right? We won in Colorado Springs and in Jacksonville, which nobody thought we were going to do, 2 Republican cities in May. We got to 56% in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We won that Pennsylvania House special. So that very positive trend line that we saw in 2022 is carried over. That same basic election, which is that we've been a good party, they're still a little too crazy, and our grassroots is pushing our performance to the upper end of what's possible. That's manifesting and playing out in 2023. And now we have this summer, what's happened this summer. And I wrote a piece this week about this, which is, we've had a really good summer as a party, right? Not only did we win those elections, but on some of the major attacks that the Republicans have been making against Joe Biden, high inflation, bad economy. Well, that's not true, right? Inflation's way down. The economy is really robust. They've attacked him for the border, the struggles on the border. Well, his new plan now has made it so that the Washington Post over the weekend said that the border is eerily quiet. It's been a remarkable policy success. They've attacked us on crime, but we know that murder rates are way down this year based on early 2023 data. And we know that, crime is still a fraction of what it was 30 years ago. And the murder rate is higher in Republican states than Democratic states. Republican states are much more dangerous than Democratic states. So that talking point is also evaporating. Another one of their major talking points was that Joe Biden waged a war on energy and strangled domestic energy production, which then created higher gas prices, which created higher inflation. Well, this year, we're going to see more oil produced in America than any year in American history, and gas prices have come way down. So that talking point is evaporating. So while Joe Biden has strengthened his case for re-election through the strong economic performance, through bloodying Putin and Ukraine, through the early impact that we're seeing on the 3 big economic bills that we passed in 21 and 22, in the performance on the border, on crime improving, right? All of these things have strengthened his argument for re-election, while making their attacks against him far less effective, meaning that, what's happened to that, we've had a good summer. They've had the Republican talking points have had a really bad summer. And the truth is, the Republican Party could not look more awful and messy than it does right now. We are a together party. We're united behind Biden and Vice President Harris. We're raising lots of money. The money numbers just came out, right? All the Senate races, the House races, Biden's raising tons of money. We're not fighting with each other, right? We look like a modern, together adult party. They look like the biggest mess in American history, right? And so not only is Trump, serial criminal, leading them by 30, 40 points in the primary, he's about to go through some very tough things over the next few days. I mean, I think what people have to recognize is that the most significant thing that happened this week was the Attorney General of Michigan, indicting 16 of the fake electors in that fake elector scheme in Michigan. The reason that matters so much is that you have to think about the 1,000 prosecutions that have taken place of the people who participated in January 6th, and realize that that effort, which was an effort to overturn the election, was started way back, in October. They created these fake electors, and then the attack on the Capitol was a tactic to achieve the election overthrow. But the other tactic was all these fake electors and the forging of documents all around the country. And so what's likely to be the case now is that the next 200 to 300 people who are indicted by the Justice Department and by states are going to be prominent Republicans all across the country. These fake elector schemes played out in Arizona, Nevada, in New Mexico, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Georgia, Pennsylvania. And so Ron and Romney McDaniel's on camera admitting to participating in all of this. So just like the Watergate prosecutions went on for many, many years after Nixon resigned, it could be that what we're seeing is an ongoing backdrop for the next several years of American politics of prominent Republicans being indicted, plea bargaining, all the things like we're seeing with the January 6th folks. And because Trump led a conspiracy, this was a vast conspiracy to overturn the election. And, there is no greater crime in our democracy, no greater political crime than trying to overturn a presidential election. And everyone who participated in this illicit scheme needs to face the Department of Justice in the coming years. So this is a big, grenade that's about to go off, not just for Trump, but for all the Republicans. And I think it's going to further degrade a very already degraded brand. I put in my Substack this week, right now, according to Civics, which tracks daily the standing of the two parties and all these other things, the Republicans, we're at 38-55 as a party, minus 17. I wish it was better, but that's where it is. They're at 29-62, minus 33. So much worse than we are already. There's similar numbers for Kevin McCarthy and the House Republicans. And then finally, among 18 to 34-year-old voters, the Republicans are minus 55. That's extinction level numbers, right? In this poll, in the Civics poll this week. So their brand is already degraded. It's about to go through further degradation over the next few weeks and potentially over the next year. And then the second thing that I think will act as like a major anchor pulling them down, or a grenade, blowing up their brand, is going to be Ron DeSantis's governorship in Florida and all the horrible things that he's done in Florida, which we're reading about every day. I mean, Kamala Harris made this the central event today, that they've rewritten the textbooks in Florida to talk about the positive attributes of slavery, right? I mean, these are things that should cause that party brand damage for years and years to come. And I can talk more about that if you want. So I think that our case for re-election next year is going to be very, very strong. We've got the power and the muscle of this new grassroots all across the country. We've got, them having the worst man who's ever lived in the United States in all of our history being their leader, winning by 50, 60 points. And the number two guy being, now we know, not only a crazy extremist, but a terrible politician. It's very hard to see. As a strategist, I can see our path for victory. I can't see theirs. And so I just can't see it. I don't see how they win the election next year. Anything can happen, right? Things can change. But today, I'd much rather be us than them. I think the House will flip if we win the presidency, and the Senate will be up for grabs. I mean, we all know, those of you who study this know that, there are three states where we have to win that are going to be tough for us: Ohio, West Virginia, and Montana, that in a presidential year are going to be tough. And so the Senate, I think, is like 50-50. Even if we win the presidency and win the House, we could still lose the Senate, certainly within the realm of the possible. But what it means for all of us is that we not only have to do all the work that you do in elections, right? The texting, the phone calling, the postcarding, the canvassing, and all the stuff that you do, but we also need all of us together to get loud. And the way I like to think about this, I worked in the war room with James Carville and George Stephanopoulos 31 years ago as a very young guy. And, what we tried to do in the war room was to win the information war every day. It wasn't just about rapid response. It was about controlling the information environment. And James, I just talked to James Carville 2 days ago. He called me because I'm going to go on his podcast. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time. And we talked about all this. And I said, James, my advice that I'm giving through Hopium is very war room-ish. And the way I'd like to end is by saying this, that when you think of the war room, you think of like 20 sweaty kids drinking Red Bulls, producing rapid response videos. We need to think of the war room as 1 million proud patriots getting up every day and taking the good work of the Democrats and Joe Biden and spreading it through their networks. Tucker Carlson on a good night reached 3 million people. If 1 million proud patriot Democrats, reach 10 people every day, that's 10 million people. We have far more power than we understand. And I'm giving all of you permission to become information warriors for your democracy and to take the good works of Joe Biden and the Democrats and spread it through your networks in any way that's comfortable for you, right? In addition to the campaign work, we have to do both because we have to close that loudness gap that I was describing, be loud and proud about our party, because for 3 reasons. Joe Biden is a good president, the country is better off, and the Democratic Party is really strong today. And I'm proud to be with all of you, excited to be in the trenches as you do your good work, and let's have a fun conversation.
Wow, that was great. Thanks, Simon. For those of you who don't know, I'm Aaron Hamburger. I'm the membership coordinator at 31st Street. And I also am often the question curator in events like these. So I've been scrolling through the chat and seeing questions that people have. And if you have other ones that you'd like to pose, please put them there. So the first one that I want to ask is kind of an amalgam of several questions, which is how can we actually get loud and break through that bubble? John Medaglia was pointing out that even though the facts are on our side, it's very hard to kind of break through. And just anecdotally, I know I've been traveling to various places and I keep hearing people saying, oh my God, inflation is so bad, crime is so bad. Like even if the facts might be on our side, they don't feel true to a lot of people. So, and especially with, the media environment being what it is, the negativity bias, they much rather highlight the negative stories than the positive stories. How can we do this?
Well, this is a great question. And I've started my career as a TV producer and writer. I worked for ABC News. And so I grew up in the media business. And a lot of my work has been sort of on modernizing arguments and communication and being more effective on this for a long time. And I'll say this is that there is no single answer, but this has to be a man on the moon kind of project for the Democrats, right? There are new media organizations, that are being created in addition to things like Pod Save America. You've now got Courier Newsroom and Deep State Radio and Midas Touch and Resolute Square. So there are new, they built their own media and to get their stories out. I mean, if you think about it, right? Fox News, which I was a guest on Fox News for 17 years and did thousands of appearances, unpaid, by the way, I didn't take any money for Rupert Murdoch. They're basically a Republican political organization masquerading as a news organization. And they've become so powerful that basically Republican politics now has all become about performative actions to get on Fox News. They don't legislate anymore. I mean, they've become the party of Ronald Reagan, the actor, and Donald Trump, the reality TV star, which always had this sort of connection with entertainment, has now become fully a performative entity. It's not really a traditional political party anymore. But that investment they've made through talk radio and Fox News and OAN and all these other things have given them an enormous loudness advantage. And so to me, I think there's a couple things we have to do. One is we have to build new institutional capacity, which is being done. It's not happening fast enough. It needs to be more. But certainly, and even me going to Substack, one of the reasons I left my classic C3, C4 nonprofit I've been running was that I wanted to dive into this new media space. I think Substack's part of the answer too, as well. I've really enjoyed being on the Substack platform. It's very powerful. The second thing, though, is that I think that we have more to do. I often, when I began my Hopium journey in March, I would often hear, well, what's the DNC doing? What's Biden doing? And I, in a very JFK-like way, I put it back to you, is that what are you doing? Right? What are you doing for not, what is your country going to do for you? What are you going to do for your country? We have to, as Timothy Snyder said, not obey in advance. I mean, we have to learn how to get louder and to recognize that part of being a patriot is about crowding out their negative noise and their disinformation by putting positive sentiment into our discourse. I've become very convinced that the central tactic of MAGA is to put negative sentiment into our discourse every day, to make us feel bad about our democracy, our institutions, our country, our leaders, each other, right? Everything. They want us to feel bad about everything, because if everything is terrible, then that creates the premise and a context for a radical politics, right? The system has failed, everything is bad, carnage across the country. And so part of our responsibility as small d Democrats and as proud Americans is we have to put more positive sentiment into the discourse every day and not allow this negative news bias that you described, the positive sentiment. Because I think what's happened now, and I saw this in my battle with the red wave, is that the red wave was a false creation by a series of Republicans that then bamboozled, and they bullied and bamboozled the media into buying into it. And when I was fighting it, right, I was challenging it in those final few weeks before the election, I was attacked by Nate Silver and by the Cook Report and by people at NBC News and other stuff for having hopium, for being delusional, for being crazy person, basically, right? And I was right and they were all wrong. And we just witnessed the greatest political, media failure in modern American history. The entire national media got the election wrong. And by the way, you notice there's been virtually no kind of self-reflection about that. And in part, what happened was they got pressured and bullied by this very loud right to sort of buy into a narrative that was false, but it became convenient because everybody else was doing it. This is why, to me, what I'm doing, and the central reason I'm here, is to say, I don't exactly know how we do this. I don't, some people can send emails, some people can tweet, some people can put stuff on threads, but it's critical that we're louder, and we're louder with positive information that is going to help Americans have permission to love their country again. And I say oftentimes about when I get asked about young people and working with young people, and all of you who have kids, I mean, I've got 17, my kids are 22, 20, and 17. And by the way, for those of you in Montgomery County, I'm down in the Palisades in DC, is that nearby, is that there's an urgency to helping young people in America love their country the way we did when we were kids. They don't have that. That's been taken away from them, by MAGA, by Republicans, not by circumstances. Because if you come and watch my presentation called With Democrats, Things Get Better, what I am going to explain to you is that the economy today may be better than it's ever been in American history. Crime is lower, than it was 30 years ago. All these measures of societal health are in almost every measure, we're doing better today than we were 30 years ago, and yet nobody feels it. And that's, in my view, because of what you were describing, Aaron, right, is this combination of this toxic and very loud MAGA that's trying to convince everybody that everything sucks, and the media, which has become complicit in this, in part because they're trying to get clicks. And if you write Joe Biden sucks, you get more clicks than Joe Biden is good, And so the ecosystem has become very adversarial to us loving our country, being proud Americans, to being proud patriots. Well, then it becomes the obligation of proud patriots to fight this information battle, to not allow them to win this part of the political struggle. And what I'm doing in my talks is I'm saying, look, I'm built the Hopium site to give you more ammunition to become more information, to be better information warriors. But there's lots of other people doing remarkable work too. Center for American Progress, lots of great groups doing stuff. But there's an urgency to this. And I think it's particularly urgent. I'm sorry I've gone on so long, but this is really important because we know that Joe Biden is, let's say, an average communicator, right? So it means that there's more that we have to do to amplify his good work. He needs a little bit of our help, right? And we should be spending time, you need to be loud without being annoying, as I always say, right? We all have our friends who send us too many emails and then you click, get rid of them. But one of the things, if you come and hang out at Hopium, you're going to see organizations like this all over the country who are building new graphics to send through their networks. They're building websites, promoting Joe Biden's presidency. They're adopting youth voter registration drives in their states. People are doing amazing work all over the country in exactly this way. And hopefully you can learn from others that are doing good work and help adopt some of the things that they think are working. But there's an urgency to this, Aaron, and thank you for starting that off with this question, because I know this is, let me say one last thing, is that, the Republican ecosystem, they have in there, the story they've been told is the media is biased against them. So we have to be loud. We have to spread all this stuff through our networks. We saw the media as something that was outside of our politics. It was something to be influenced. They viewed the media as part of their politics. We have to change our way of thinking about all this, I think. And then what I'm doing tonight and what I'm doing in my other presentations is saying, look, we have no choice. We got to just go get louder. It's going to be messy. We're going to suck at it, right? It's like anything, beginner's mind, right? Anything you do the first time, you're going to fall off the bike in the beginning. But after 6 months or 9 months, right, you're going to find your stride and you're going to find your voice and you're going to become a powerful information warrior for your democracy. And that's not something you're ever going to let go, because we can't ever let MAGA, once MAGA is defeated, we can't ever let a politics like that come back. And so the work will never really be done at the end of the day.
It's interesting. There's a little discussion happening in the chat about many of us live in blue bubbles, and we tend to talk to like-minded people. And the question is, well, do we need to spread the message to the red people? And an interesting point made is that, yes, but we need to drive up the excitement on the blue side as well, so that people are not just, well, I'm voting for Biden to get rid of Trump, that people are excited to actually do.
My hope is that what we do together is that by the spring of next year, there are 1 million people who are information warriors, who are then spreading and have knowledge and understanding and can make these arguments and help reinforce what Biden's doing, and to spread stuff through all of their networks. And the thing is, you all know that, you may only be talking, 10 of your friends may be hardcore Democrats, but one may not be, right? And if you're hitting one person and 1 million people are hitting one person, that's 1 million people, right? And so I think you have to think of this as the information ecosystem in America is like a pond, and we're throwing a big boulder into the pond, right? And you're going to see the rivulets, flowing outward from there. It's not wasted. Every one of us, if you inform 10 Democrats and they get better at this, and then they hit all of their networks, you're going to start hitting independent and Republican voters at some point in that food chain, right? And the key thing is that we can't rely on campaign ads any longer. It's somebody pointed out that people under 45 don't watch television, right? All this stuff. The most effective way, just like if you had anybody come on and talk about canvassing, there's always been this theory that the most effective way to reach somebody is by knocking on their door and talking to them. Well, we know that younger people, right, get their news through their networks and their friends. And so burrowing into these networks and having these networks start to move information, not just pictures of dogs or, whatever, right? It's really important. It's organic. It's real. Hey, Mary, did you know that Joe Biden created 13 million jobs? I'll give you an example of that, right? We know from polling that when you inform, people don't know that more jobs. I tell this story. I want to make sure people understand the gravity of all this, right? So in 2020, we know from a poll that was done in January 2022, they asked a simple question, which is, were more jobs created in 2020 or in 2021? And in 2020, that we lost 3 million jobs. And in 2021, we created more jobs than any year in American history, right? 8 million. So this is kind of a simple question. And guess how many people got it right? 20% of people in the poll. And people, not 20% is like people not knowing that we won World War II in 1946, right? And so we're talking about, what you're describing, Aaron, is this intimidation of the right-wing noise machine is bullying even our people. I can tell you from the talks that I give, and it's even showing up in the chat, right? What's happened to us as a party and as a family is that we've internalized these right-wing attacks into our head. And let me give you an example. Let me go through the exercise I do in this. So I'm an old English major from Tufts University, and I want us to practice speaking more in declarative sentences. So here's the exercise. Joe Biden has been a good president, period. The country is better off, period. The Democratic Party is strong, period. No commas, no howevers, no buts, no semicolons, nothing that we do to then take one of their arguments and then diminish our own. Our job is not to make their arguments for them. They are really good at that. Our job is to make our arguments for us. And we're not very good at that. It is unbelievable to me in these presentations that I've started doing since over a year ago, how spooked and how much the Republicans live in our brains. You need to flush it out. You need to not live where they live. You need to live where we live. You need to start from a place, Joe Biden is a good president. The country's better off. And what happens is in the chats, right? The first 10 chats are, Simon, I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about this. Yeah, I'm concerned about it too, but I'm not letting it overwhelm me, right? What I'm doing is we need to be spending more time in this place, 2/3 of our communications with each other, should be about, isn't that cool what Joe Biden did? Or isn't that great? Isn't Wes Moore an amazingly talented new governor? Or whatever it is. Instead, what happens, we immediately go to the dark places and the scary places, and it becomes debilitating, and we have to stop it. It's overwhelming all of us. Of course, I'm concerned about Joe Manchin, and I'm concerned about, Jill Stein's new venture, and I'm concerned about Robert Kennedy, and I'm concerned about Donald
That
Trump.
was my next
Yeah,
question.
but I don't let it overwhelm me, right? I don't let it. What I do is I take it, and because the answer to all these third party efforts or these rogue candidates are all the same, which is we have to build up Joe Biden. The answer is all the same. If we win by 55%, it doesn't matter. The third party candidates doesn't matter. And so I know that sounds facile, but I'll just say a couple more things about, let's get the third party thing over with. So first of all, I think we can win this election by 10 points. I was pretty right about the last election. And I think, when I joke that hopium is hope with a plan. And what I mean by that is that in 2022, we made a decision collectively, millions of us, that we weren't going to let this election go to the Republicans. And we changed the future through our work. It wasn't just hope, it was hope with a plan. And we changed the future. We have to do that again. We have to go to 55 this time. If we get 55, it doesn't matter. All this third party stuff doesn't matter. I think the third party stuff. So first of all, we shouldn't talk about it. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to all of us. It's just irrelevant. They are all spoilers. None of them are going to amount to anything. They're all playing on the margins of the game. They're all really silly people, right? The Cornel West, Jill Stein. You have to say, by the way, Cornel West, Jill Stein. Every time you talk about Cornel West, you should use both of their names, because every Democrat who's of a certain age, when you say the word Jill Stein, right, it elicits what it should elicit, right? The second thing is that I have been writing extensively about Joe Manchin and No Labels, and I have said that I felt that the upper limit for a candidate at third party candidacy like Manchin's is 7-8%. And that if there was actually real poll, because the number of true independents in the country is about 9 or 10% of the electorate. It's not true that it's a third. It's like 45%, 46% Democrat, 44% Republican, 10% independent. There is no middle lane. It doesn't exist. There's no third party lane here. Donald Trump's going to get 45% of the vote if he gets hit by a bus 2 days before the election, and Joe Biden's going to get at least 45% no matter what happens. And so this idea that No Labels was pushing, that there was this middle lane where they could get 25, 30%, I just want to say is bullshit. Okay. It's an unbelievable lie. And anybody who actually works with polling and knows polling knows that what they're saying at its core is a rancid lie. And so today, Monmouth came out with a poll where they actually named the candidates, not independent centrist, right? Joe Manchin, Huntsman on a ticket, 2%. 2%. Joe Biden wins with 49, Trump's at 45. Those guys are at 2. We need to be talking we need to not build up Joe Manchin and No Labels. We need to make them small and little. And what's been happening, I think the Democratic Party has mishandled the No Labels thing. We've been making them powerful. Joe Manchin could change the election. He's an important person. He's a silly person. He's going to get 2% of the vote. He's going to have a hard time matching Jill Stein's numbers, from a few years ago. He's little and small and a spoiler, and he's not going to be able to raise any money. And this is embarrassing for him after all the years that he's been in office. I'm not scared by any of this stuff. We have to keep an eye on it. But, and by the way, I've also told people privately that I thought it would be possible that No Labels would pull more from Republicans and Democrats because their party has already splintered. I mean, there's a whole never Trumper, never MAGA, Liz Cheney wing of their party, where our party is not going to splinter. It's not going to be 2016. The stakes of the election are too high. We're not going to splinter this time. And in my view, and in the Monmouth poll, when they asked sort of an expanded question, it pulled more from the Republicans than the Democrats. And so I'm not saying that but I just think we can't get spooked by this stuff. We can take these guys. We can take all of them. The one thing I want everyone to know about Robert Kennedy is that he's not running as a Democrat, right? He's not reaching out to Democratic groups. He's not going and campaigning in the early states. He's not going on traditional media. He's only appearing in right-wing media and right-wing venues. And we now know from polling that his approval rating with Republican voters is like 40 to 20. His approval rating with Democrats is like 20-50. It's terrible, right? So what I believe is happening is that Trump is grooming him to be his vice president. And that he's going to try to run as a unity ticket, a bipartisan ticket with the Kennedy name. The problem is that Robert Kennedy is batshit crazy and is going to be a very ineffective candidate. And I know this is getting recorded, and is going to be a very bad candidate. And I don't think it's going to work. But we have to recognize is that we should be intolerant with people that we know who say that he's running as a Democrat, because he's not. He's not running as a Democrat. He's running to become the Republican vice president. He's not participating in the Democratic primary in any way. I mean, he's not making any effort to get Democratic votes. So don't call him a Democrat. We shouldn't call him a Democrat. He's a Republican. And he's not in our party, and we should not accept him in our party. And if you haven't watched any of his videos, if you haven't really checked in with him and watched him, I mean, he is not going to be a serious candidate, even if he's on the Trump ticket. And I think it's a sign of the desperation of Trump world that they're even considering this, given how nutty he is. He got ripped to shreds today in Congress. And so I think what I just want to say is, I think we're in control of our own destiny here. And what we have to do is we have to do the work, right? We've got to be loud for Joe Biden, sell his story. We've got to do the postcarding and all the work we're going to do, right? We got to register young people. If we do all that work, we're going to have a really good election, in my view.
Now, just to take a slightly different tack here, another question that came up in the chat was about the voter registration for young people. Do you think that that's something that we should be strategic about and focus on voter registration of young people in blue states or swing, blue voters in swing states?
Everywhere.
Or red states also?
Everywhere. Because young people are, we are, the under 45 vote 20 years ago was a battleground vote. It was a jump ball. Bush won it sometimes, we won it sometimes. The youth vote, the under 45 vote now is regularly plus 15, plus 20 Democrat. And it's a structural thing that's happened. It's irregardless of who the candidate is, it's irregardless of the election. And it's because the Republicans since Reagan have been a terrible political party, and we've been a good party. And if you've lived in the United States during this period, right, the Democrats are sane and have had good presidents, and Republicans have had terrible presidents. And so people who are younger, who grew up after Reagan, have a very different understanding of the two parties. If you're older, you kind of have this memory of the Democrats kind of collapsing in 68, and Reagan comes in on the white horse and saves the country. And so you're much more favorable to Republicans. People under 45 who grew up after Reagan have a very different understanding. 2 failed Bush presidents, crazy Trump, 3 good Democratic presidents. So if we want to improve our standing everywhere in the country, we need as many young people to vote as possible. And I did this analysis you can see on my website called Get to 55, where I show that if we did one thing, if we held everything in 2020 even, just kept the same numbers in the election, and we changed one thing, which is we got under 45-year-old voters to vote at the same proportion as their population, which is not a crazy thing, right? We're not talking about doing something that's wild, right? Just their same proportion as that in the population. Biden wins by 10 points. That one thing. And so we're talking about, creating, and we had incredible youth turnout in the battleground states in 2022. We had great youth turnout nationally in 2020. It's, young people aren't voting more. It's not their fault. It's our fault that they're not voting more. Our system is very arcane. We're one of the only countries in the world that has voter registration. In almost every country in the world, you turn 18, you can vote anywhere with your ID. And it's not local elections, so you can't be registered in one place or the other. And so we have all these barriers for young people to participate. And so that's why we've got to work hard. We have a year to do this. And if we can increase youth voter registration, we're going to kill them in the election next year. We're going to crush them. And because young people, Republicans, as I said earlier, the approval rating of 18 to 34-year-olds, the Republicans right now is 18 positive, 73 negative. That means the Republican Party is basically not available to 80% of the people under 34 in the United States. These are crazy numbers, by the way. These are not numbers you saw 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. The youth problem for the Republican Party is existential. And so why is it as Democrats, we accept the fact that the people that vote for us the most vote the least? We should change that. We have the power, the money, the capacity to change that. So one of the things I would encourage you to look at, if you want to think about a concrete thing you could do, there's an organization called the Civic Center, and I have an interview with Laura Brill, who's from the Civic Center. She's built a national program to try to get every high school student in America to vote. And it's like in a box, right? You can, if you have a BCC high school, right, you can get a coordinator. They can, my daughter who goes to Sidwell is going to launch this campaign at Sidwell next year, and it's all going to be based on Laura's work. And here's the basic premise behind this is that 35 states now, you can register to vote when you're 17 or younger. So in DC, you can register when you're 16. You can't vote till you're 18, but you can register when you're 16. In Virginia, you can register at 16. I don't know what it is in Maryland, but in 35 states, you can register at 17 or younger. So what Laura has figured out through research is that if you can get 80-90% of the high school graduating class to register, they start voting and they become regular voters before they scatter, right? Before they go off, because a third of kids don't go on to higher education after high school, right? And so you need, or any kind of education after high school. So you need to get them when they're still there. So she's launching voter registration drives, high school voter registration drives all over the country. She's got staff that are helping people find coordinators and do this. And last night, one of the groups that I spoke to 2 months ago, who I introduced to Laura, did a organizing call to launch a statewide effort in Arizona, where they were going to attempt to adopt high schools where they'll get coordinators. They had 300 people on the call last night in Arizona, 300 people to launch a youth voter registration drive across Arizona. We can do this in all the states that you operate in. And, because all of us know somebody at a high school, right? Like, hey, state rep so-and-so's niece is like the student government president at so-and-so high school, right? Setting these things up would be easy. And high schools have Democratic clubs. They also have national service requirements. And so there's inside all of these high schools, there are already existing systems to do this kind of activity, right? Staff people who are looking for civic engagement kind of activity. And as long as it's nonpartisan, you want Democrats and Republicans, right? There's a lot more Democrats and Republicans who are young. So having it be nonpartisan is fine, right? That's not a big deal. And as my daughter said, she's going to reach out to the Republicans, at Sidwell, and there aren't many, but she wants to do it with them, right? And as this should be, right? This should not be a partisan thing. Voting should not be a partisan thing. Everyone should vote, and this is a social good. And it also, I think, benefits the Democratic Party to make it clear to young people that we're sending a very clear signal that you're at the center of our politics. You're not at the kids' table. That our politics is about your future, and to let them know that the place is set for them at our table, the food is warm, right, and all this other stuff. And too often young people feel like they're at the kids' table in our politics. We got to change that. I'm speaking to a group tomorrow. I'll give you an example, and I'll report back to Lisa and Susan on this. I'm speaking to a group in Oregon that I've been speaking to regularly, who has invited youth activists. It's an older group, older people, right? They now have youth activists who are participating in their weekly Zooms and are now active in their organization because they invited them in. And they got to see people on Zooms like me and other people. They're like, this is pretty cool. And so they now have a whole youth wing that's co-running the organization with them because of my advocacy around this stuff a few months ago. And I'm going tomorrow night. They're based in Oregon. I'm speaking to them to sort of get updated on this sort of co-generational or this multi-generational activity. If we're going to make young people the center of our politics, we have to make young people the center of our politics, period, in every way, right? And so, that's part of the answer to this, Aaron.
Now, there's a question that came up in the chat related to this, which is a lot of young people, particularly on the progressive side of things, are very angry with Biden about environmental policies.
That's not true. I mean, that's just not
true.
Yeah, it's not true. I mean, there are activists. Biden's approval rating with young. So the thing is, we have to separate the vast number of young voters from a handful of activists. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that Joe Biden has done more to counter climate change than any single person in the history of the world. And we're going to be able to make that case in the election. I'm not worried about this. This is a slam dunk, no brainer thing. Yeah, we've got work to do. But America is now the single global leader in countering climate change. He's done more to invest and accelerate clean energy development than anybody in the history of the country.
But do
And
young
because
people know that and understand?
Well, no, it's like what I said earlier. People don't know anything that he's done. And I can tell you that I was on a call the other day where an older person said they had spoken to a youth group like this and went through all the stuff Biden had done. And they're like, wow, he's done a lot. This is great. And I think we have to recognize that, look, the difference between politics and advocacy is that in politics, what you always say is, look, we've come a long way, but we got a long way to go. In advocacy, you always say, you haven't done enough for me. And so we can't let the angry voices of a few drown out the positive voices of the many. And the truth is that, Biden's track record on climate is exemplary, and we'll be able to make that case. This is one of the areas where you can be loud. And so the point, there's no negative news about young people and Joe Biden. There just isn't any. And I had John Della Volpe, who runs the definitive youth voting project in America at Harvard. He spoke to us a few weeks ago. You can come watch the video. What he says the issue is that there's a question about whether they're going to vote or not. And that's why, for me, putting the emphasis on voting and registration and participation becomes really critical, because when you look at all the issue areas, and I just talked to a guy who polled in some battleground states, Biden's numbers with young people in these states, they haven't released the data yet, were off the charts, right? They see the Republicans for who they are. They know they're anti-climate. They know they're pro, abortion extremism. Look, guns, abortion, our story that we can tell. Let me just do this very quickly. Biden has been an unparalleled leader in the fight against climate. On guns, he just passed the first bipartisan gun safety legislation in the last 30 years. On abortion, the Democratic Party continues to fight to make reproductive health central to our politics. The Republicans are trying to take these rights away. On the economy, we have worker shortages all over the United States. Young people have an easier time getting jobs now than possibly any time in the last 30 or 40 years in the United States. Healthcare, we now have the lowest health uninsured rate in American history, hugely important for young people. We're going to have a very powerful story to tell, but like everything else, if we don't tell it, you can't score unless you shoot, right? If we don't make the case, then we shouldn't expect people to hear it, right? And so I'm not, again, like everything else here, there is virtually nothing negative happening with the Democrats right now. And people have to get used to that. Take the wins when they come, not look for trouble when there isn't any, not turn a molehill into a mountain, right? I mean, Joe Biden has been a really good president. And, I go through my Substack, I am pounding every day on all the accomplishments and achievements of this administration. And the most important thing, again, that we can all do is become amplifiers and information warriors, and convincing ourselves first, right? And then convincing others in our networks. On a call I did last week, somebody said, a Hopium subscriber, I was at a dinner with a bunch of friends, just friends, right, hanging out, 8 of us. And somebody said, Joe Biden sucks. And they started using my stuff. And she said she turned the entire room around, within a few minutes, because the data is so clear. And this was just casual French stuff, right? She was able to turn people's understanding, because our minds have been so poisoned by all this right-wing, noise machine stuff. And we have to reprogram even just each other, right? From, I always joke, like, unemployment is 3% right now. So think about that in a room, you walk into a room, there's 97% of people, 97 people have jobs, three people don't. And the Democrats spend all their time talking about the 3 and not the 97. And we can do both, right? It's not that we don't care, and I'm not being heartless, right? But there becomes a point where this stuff starts distorting reality. And the reality is that, more people are, we have more people. Do you know that up until very recently, there were 2 job openings for every unemployed person in America? That's never happened before in the history of the country, right? I mean, the economic opportunities that exist today for people are almost unparalleled. The bottom 25, 50%, the wage gains that have taken place, the bottom 25, 50% of the United States have seen their wages and their incomes go way up under Biden. And so, we have a lot here that we have to learn, to unlearn their noise, their rancid right-wing propaganda that's sitting in our heads and in our discourse every day, to become conscious that our discourse is manipulated, right? To free ourselves, like the Matrix, right? Or whatever movie you want to do, to free yourself from this false reality and rebuild it, starting from a place of love of country, patriotism, optimism, hope, all the things that were part of America that we knew when we were kids, right? We have to not let them win by convincing us this country is less than it really is, and that we are less than we really are. I mean, this is the greatest country on earth. The American people, in a time of enormous crisis and COVID and January 6th, went to work and got us through and worked their asses off during this time and built the strongest economy in the world. It's amazing what we've done together. This is a remarkable people. The grit and the can-do spirit of America has never been more alive than it is today. And we can't let a bunch of right-wing crazy politicians take that away from us.
So I love that note that we really have to start with ourselves and make sure that we are totally grounded, and then we work out from there, which I think is kind of a great sort of note of hope to end on. And I know I speak for everybody at 31st Street. We just want to thank you, Simon, for sharing your message with us. I know it is so motivating as we do our work to hear this.
So can I say one last thing? Because it didn't
Yes.
come up. So
Yes.
I have this, when I give my presentation called With Democrats, Things Get Better, I talk about something I think is really important. And I just want to close on this. So FDR in 1941 gave what was probably the most important speech ever given, political speech given in American English, the Four Freedoms speech, where he said that the world after World War II was going to be based upon freedom and opportunity, right? Not around dominion and authoritarianism and sort of the control of people, but the freedom of people. And that speech, then, those four freedoms became in the foundation of the United Nations Charter. It became part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that Eleanor Roosevelt pushed through in 1948. And it became the foundation on which the entire modern world was built. And since that time, that world that has evolved has been a golden age in human history. There's never been a better time to be alive than in recent times in the world. More people have lived under democracy than any time in human history. Global poverty rates have plummeted. Life expectancy has exploded. You know, people of color and women have more opportunities now than they've ever had in human history. And we did that. The Democratic Party did that. And it's my belief that our party has done more good for more people than any other organized political force in the history of humankind. And it's why the fact that that system now is being attacked and challenged by MAGA and by Russia and by China means that our party, which many, many years ago rose up to defend freedom and democracy, we're being called again. And I just want you to have that same sense of pride that I have, that I'm part of something that has done more good for more people than any other organized political force in all of human history. That's who we are. And that's why the stakes of what's happening now are so important, because that system that's built freedom for people all around the world is under assault. And it's why we have to win the domestic battle here. We have to win in Ukraine. We have to challenge the Chinese. We have to do all the things that Joe Biden's doing, because the people of the world deserve the same kind of opportunities that we've had here in the United States. And so you're part of something deeply noble and powerful and historic. And so we've got to take that and inspire us in the work that we do to make sure that MAGA doesn't prevail here and all around the world. So thanks everybody so much. Keep working hard. Huge thanks from me for the work that you do and for taking time out of your busy lives to care about your country the way you are here tonight and through the group, this wonderful group who's expanding and growing and doing all sorts of wonderful stuff. Keep working hard and let me know how I can help.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Really wonderful.